Welcome back, and we're in Africa, where searches for survivors and victims of a doomsday cult in Kenya's Shakahola forest have discovered 22 more bodies over the weekend. According to authorities, the discoveries bring the death toll of one of the country's worst tragedies to 201. Roda Onyacha, a regional commissioner, said search and rescue operations continues in the forest in the country's southwest for more bodies. She said one more suspect had also been arrested, bringing the total number of those detained over the deaths to 26. Throughout this week, authorities have been digging up shallow graves scattered through the forest, looking for remains, scoring the area for any survivors, as hundreds of people are still reported missing. Meanwhile, Kenya's President William Ruto has apologized to Kenyans over the Christian doomsday deaths, admitting laxity and complacency from the government side. Mr. Ruto said in a televised interview, in his words, "I'm taking responsibility that, as the president, these Shakahola murders should not have happened. For that, I truly say I'm sorry." He blamed the country's police and intelligence officials for failing to discover the cult's activities on time. He said the concerned officials would have to give an account of the mass killings. The president said that he would do everything in his power to prevent future religious deaths. He also promised to visit the Shakahola forest once investigations were completed. Kenyan journalist Brian Mwenda joins me now from Nairobi on this. Hi, Brian. Speak to us about the latest developments. We are learning, very scary still. More bodies have been exhumed. What else do we know?
All right. More bodies have been exhumed. And of course, there's been a lot of political statements coming from a weekend where most of our politicians actually also attend church. And some have, asked the government to take very stringent measures on the security apparatus and guys in the security sector in the country. And as you saw yesterday during a live interview with the Kenyan media, our president, William Samoei Ruto, did take responsibility. A lot have been said. A lot of, discovery of these bodies has also continued. Now, the latest story and the latest update has been the 22 bodies that were discovered over the weekend, bringing the death toll to 201 person. Of course, a bigger number is expected.
Something the president did was blame the country's police and intelligence officials, saying that they failed to discover activities on time. Is there any evidence to suggest that perhaps the authorities did know and, they couldn't do anything about it, or they just kept mum? This man called Paul Mackenzie has been arrested quite a number of times. And the last arrest happened on 2022, actually, when he was arrested after some allegations about him were raised. He also has a TV station that was also shut down. And surprisingly, after being shut down, he came back on air. And first, from the Communications Authority of Kenya, which gives licenses to national broadcasts, yes, some people say that some people need to take action and also need to take responsibility of giving this license. Talking about the security apparatus in the country, people say that the NIS, which is in charge of the national intelligence, the question, what were they doing for the last many years? He has been arrested many times. He has been framed. And the last arrest is when Paul Mackenzie decided to be a Dara man on a mission. And that's when the death toll really rose after the last arrest, yes. And there is a lot of fear. Do we think that the death toll could rise beyond 201, the figure that we know as of this time? And also, how are Kenyans reacting to the president's apology that he's sorry?
Definitely, we are really expecting more and more, sadly, because about 500 people more than 500 people actually are reported missing ever since they joined the cult. And, it's going to be a little bit tough to really locate them, because every day there's, the exercise of discovering these shallow graves, because they were not really given decent burials, and now they're really trying to trace them. So more numbers are expected. Kenyans, after yesterday's apology by the president, taking an understanding from why the president did apologize is because he was the vice president or the deputy president in the last two terms, which 10 years back, and in the process of the term, when the cult was reported back in 2015, he was still consuming national intelligence reports, and that's why he took responsibility. Now, Kenyans have said that now that you're president and you're the deputy president back when this cult did start, yes, we're going to take the apology. Some say, well, too little, too late, And right now, the story is a little bit, it's a bit heated, a lot of emotions, and people are going to wait a little bit more, even before the president can even take any action or responsibility even more. Yes.
Of course, we understand that police arrested the leader of the church, Paul Mackenzie, who's been accused of ordering his followers to starve themselves, their children, to death. Do we know, what the status of, his arrest is, and the investigations ongoing to take the matter to court, to trial?
Definitely. Last week, Thursday, the prosecution side did go to the court and asked for at least 90 days for Paul Mackenzie and 17 others to be detained. However, the court also decided to give only 30 days, actually. And now I think they're remaining something around 23 days. And we continue waiting to see what discovery is made, because the weight of this crime scene is a little bit emotional. Talking about religion and talking about the law, they have to both intermarry to make sure that there are some grounds in which this case is going to be prosecuted.
Perhaps before we let you go, Brian, many people wonder the magnitude of this with regards to the number and the discoveries that are being made. Didn't church members detect, foul play, detect, what this meant? How did this gruesome act carry on for so long?
How this man was actually even noticed or discovered is that one grandfather happened to notice that their child lost their life, their grandson lost their lives because of this cult. And that's when, let's call him a whistleblower, went to the authorities and said, what, this cult has been there for long. As I said, the Communications Authority of Kenya has also flagged them once in a while and, gotten back their licenses. So a lot was happening until that was a turning point. At the point where now the child lost their lives, and now the grandfather had to take an action. Actually, one interesting thing that you need to know is that even the son is not part of the cult. The son decided not to engage in what the father does, and a lot is really happening. Something small that I did forget to touch on is that there has been the process of now the autopsy has been happening, and so far there's suffocation, there's strangulation, there's starvation. There's also, they've discovered that there are injuries on the heads of people, so which means that some were really forced to part way with lives. And there was a specific case where there was a delivery complication, and it means that there was a mother who was about to get a newborn, but the cult took away the promise.
We definitely do know that a number of families are looking for closure, to this case. We continue to keep our eyes on it. We'd like to appreciate you, Brian Mwendez, the Kenyan journalist, joining us from Nairobi. Thanks a lot. And then away from Kenya to the Canadian province of Alberta, it's facing 85 active wildfires, with 24 of them considered out of control. And that's according to Josie Sonting, information officer at Alberta Wildfire, during a press conference. The information officer warned that the fire danger remains high as the peak burning period, when the temperatures are at their highest and the fuels are at their driest, is yet to come. The executive director for Alberta Emergency Management Agency said authorities had received 300 emails from people wishing to volunteer for the fire brigades, where 200 wildland firefighters from the US are already participating. Well, let's check in on elections now. Thailand's two main opposition parties agreed to form a ruling coalition after they trounced in a weekend election military-backed rivals that have controlled government for nearly a decade. Peter Lamjonerat, Move Forward's leader, did a victory lap in Bangkok, where thousands of supporters had gathered, some in the streets, others on rooftops, dressed in Move Forward's signature orange, chanting Prime Minister Peter. The 42-year-old signed autographs and vowed to change the country during his speech, while Thailand's prominent opposition force, Pheu Thai Party, accepted defeat after coming in as runner-up at the polls to the leading Move Forward Party, and will back the forging of a ruling coalition. Well, the head of Turkey's High Election Board, YSK, has confirmed that the presidential election will go to a runoff between President Tayyip Erdogan and his main rival on the 28th of May, as neither could reach the 50% threshold to win outright. Earlier today, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said current results showed him far ahead of candidate Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu in Sunday's presidential elections, but stopped short of declaring outright victory. In his first appearance after the polls closed, Mr. Erdogan said votes from abroad were still being counted and that he was 2.6 million votes ahead of his rival. In a fiery speech to an exuberant crowd outside his AK party's headquarters in Ankara, the Turkish president said he would respect the people's decision if the presidential vote goes to a runoff. Joining me now is VOA's correspondent Heather Murdoch. She joins me from southern Turkey. Hi, Heather. Give us updates on the presidential election runoff.
Well, as you mentioned, it's actually just in the past few hours been confirmed officially that there will be a runoff between President Erdogan and his main opposition rival, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. And we spoke to some people today about how they felt about it, whether they were surprised. And a lot of voters said they weren't so surprised that there is a runoff, because this country has been deeply divided in recent weeks with supporters for both sides.
And the head of Turkey's High Election Board said around 35,000 votes still left to be counted. Mr. Erdogan having 49.51% support, his rival, 44.88%. There are also talks about what President Erdogan said, that there are still more votes being expected.
Yes, there are a small percentage of votes still expected, but no one right now thinks that the results are going to be different. We will have official results at the latest by the 19th of May, but at this point, we think the runoff is quite definite.
Were there any cases of voter suppression or violence?
There was quite a bit of fear that there would be violence after the election if it came to pass that the opposition party won by a margin high enough to win in one round. Now, this didn't come to pass, so we will never know if those fears were true or if it was a rumor that was so widespread that we heard it in several different cities and towns across Turkey. As it was, the vote was, for the vast majority of places, peaceful, and there have not been any reports of widespread fraud.
And Heather, is this runoff a surprising outcome, looking at perhaps polls or the atmosphere before the elections, during the elections?
It's not really a surprising outcome because there has been such strong support for both sides in the run-up to these elections. But what is surprising for a lot of analysts watching Turkey is how close the opposition has got to winning. Mr. Erdogan has been the president of this country for more than 20 years and has a lot of popular support besides having a tremendous amount of power in the country. So analysts have been saying for weeks and months that this election could be pivotal and it could be the first election that's changed the country in decades. So it's not surprising that the vote was so close that there needs to be a runoff, but it was a bit surprising that it's come this close.
And we also know that Turkey is grappling with the aftermath of the deadly earthquake that struck the country. In terms of the outcome, turnout for the elections generally, was that encouraging, and did that play, as part of some of the issues, that affected or influenced voters in any way?
This was bittersweet and also a surprising part of this election. We went to several polls in the areas of the earthquake disaster, and there were people there, and across the country, the turnout was quite high. And the turnout was as high as you could imagine it would be in these areas where so many people have been displaced and are not necessarily even living near where they vote. But a lot of people did turn out to the polls, and we spoke to many people who said that while they were voting and they felt it was their duty and they were proud to vote, they didn't really care so much. It was hard to focus on an election right now because there is so much sorrow and so much heartbreak in that region. What was very surprising that we found today was that the earthquake zone itself voted for the most part for President Erdogan. We had thought perhaps he would lose a lot of support because of the earthquake, but it seems that was not the case here.
Heather Murdoch, VOA's correspondent, many thanks. We look to you for more updates in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going on a break now. When we return, it's the longest cooking marathon. Nigerian chef Hilda Bassi breaks world record by surpassing current Guinness World Record holder Latte Tondon, an Indian chef who achieved the feat in 2019. We'll bring you details when we return. Welcome back. Nigerian chef Hilda Effiong Bassi, popularly known as Hilda Bassi, has surpassed the current Guinness World Record holder of 87 hours 45 minutes set by Indian chef Latte Tondon in 2019 after cooking non-stop for more than 90 hours. Hilda, who has become a national sensation, has been in the kitchen for the past 4 days and has made over 100 different dishes since turning on her cooker. She's allowed one assistant at a time and can take a 5-minute break each hour, or the equivalent, over several hours. Her aim was to break a Guinness World Record for the longest cooking marathon by an individual, which she tagged Cookathon. Her attempt has captivated the country, with politicians, celebrities, fans stopping by to cheer her on. And those that have visited the venue to show their support include the Lagos State Governor, Babajide Sanwo-Olu. She also received a call from Nigeria's Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo. However, Guinness World Records says it is reviewing the evidence before saying if she has broken the record. Our entertainment correspondent, Bukola Ogunbodede, is live on ground at the Moore Gardens, Lekki, and hi. Okay, we can see you now. Hi, Bukola.
Hi. Hi.
Talk to us about the experience.
Yes. So we're here at the venue for the cooking by Hilda Bassi. I mean, we already know that she broke the record earlier of the standing record holder, which was 86:45. And she has been cooking for over 97 hours already. We do not know how much longer she'll go, but a lot of people are waiting for like 100 hours. A lot of people are here, to support her. Celebrities came in. Nancy Sima was here earlier. Akporo was here as well. And I also had the chance to speak with her mom. Her mom was so excited. She has been meeting a lot of dignitaries right from the second day. And she also said that she knows that Hilda had always had this passion right from childhood, being a cook herself. And this place feels like a carnival. I'm sure you can hear the voices of people like from the background. This place feels feels like a carnival. Everyone is excited. The DJ is playing music. Everyone is dancing. It feels like a party in the name of Hilda, basically.
And, it appears that she's saying it's not over until it's over. Do we know when she'll eventually stop, having broken the record? We also hear that, the Guinness World Record says they're reviewing the evidence. Is she waiting to hear from the Guinness World Records?
Okay, we haven't heard feedback from the Guinness Book of Record yet. I think they said they're verifying certain things, but basically she has broken the standing record, as we already know, and she's still the hours are still counting, so we do not know when she's going to stop. She's going to stop.
And Bukola, have you spoken to those who are there? We understand people have been there for like 4 days. Lots more people are still coming.
Yes, we spoke with family, people who have been there with her for since day one. We spoke with them, and they had a lot to say, that they had been praying, back behind the scenes, praying with her, cheering her on, and they're just excited to see that she's actually superseding their expectation, because they never even thought it would actually last this long, some of them.
And Bukola, will you be tasting any of those different dishes that she'll be making, still is making?
Okay, I haven't had the chance to taste any because I've been on my feet all morning, but I'm sure some people are having a taste, and I've been perceiving the aroma from here. I'm right outside our cubicle, and I must say it scents really, really delicious.
All right, we wish her all the very best. Nigerians and the world are watching. Thanks, Bukola. We hope to see you soon back here. And to the latest in Sudan, United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says at least 676 people have been killed due to the clashes between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces. The office said the clashes has also injured at least 5,576 others. According to the report, the month-long war in Sudan has now forced close to 1 million people to flee their homes, with most of them displaced within the country. Since the clashes broke out mid-April, residents of the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, have been suffering from severe food shortages, especially after dozens of factories were looted and burned. According to the United Nations, it is estimated that about 15.8 million Sudanese, or about 1/3 of Sudan's population, will need humanitarian aid in 2023, and the figure is likely to increase as a result of the war. Meanwhile, airstrikes and artillery pounded Khartoum after Sudan's warring army and Rapid Support Forces paramilitary failed to agree a ceasefire despite committing to protect civilians and allow humanitarian access. A declaration of principles was signed in Saudi Arabia last week after nearly a week of talks between the two factions, which had shared power before falling out over a transition to civilian rule. The conflict has paralyzed Sudan's economy and strangled its trade, aggravating a ballooning humanitarian crisis, with the United Nations saying that 200,000 people have now fled into neighboring states.
Our commitment is not to the partial successive humanitarian truces. This is, in fact, a particular model being built up in this particular occasion in order to soften the engagement with a lengthy humanitarian or ceasefire. So, of course, the Sudanese armed forces are not launching an offensive. They are actually making a defensive. This is why they will not open fire only if they have been attacked. And this is why from time to time there will be a kind of what apparently may be as a breach of the ceasefire. But actually this is not meant. And this is actually not the case which is currently being on. There is actually a kind of trying to operationalize the center of the town. And as much as those rebellious regiments who took refuge into heavily inhabited areas, and they confiscated houses, they are there, and this is why the army would not attack them, definitely, in order to lessen the loss of civilians.
And the Sudan Armed Forces have accused the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces of attacking worshippers in a church in Omdurman, a city adjacent to the capital, Khartoum. A Coptic Christian activist said 5 people were injured in the incident, including a priest. The army, in a statement, claimed RSF shot at worshippers in the Blessed Church in Omdurman against international humanitarian law and established customs. But RSF denies that it had attacked the church and instead accused an extremist group aligned with the Sudan Armed Forces of being behind the attack. The force also accused the SAF of assassinating an official of a football federation, Amir Hasabala, and other killings in the capital. Earlier, SAF had accused RSF of attacking 2 hospitals in Khartoum and urged the international community to recognize the group as a terrorist organization. Meanwhile, Sudanese officials have met with delegates of UN agencies to discuss crisis management and aid assistance after a month of fighting caused the humanitarian situation to deteriorate. Sudanese Finance Minister Jibril Ibrahim said he discussed in the meeting with Special Representative in Sudan, Volker Perthes, on several issues, including water shortage. The meeting took place in Port Sudan, where large numbers of Sudanese people recently resided after fleeing the war-ridden capital. The conflict has triggered a humanitarian crisis that threatens to draw in outside powers and destabilize the region. And that's our program this evening. Thank you for watching. I'm Melissa Walker. Bye for now.
Stay connected to the world with Channels